Well, morning everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara. It's me, Peter Giblett, while Dave Weeler is shutting off the coffee maker. He'll be right back with his cup of chai. Here's my nice little blended fruit juice drink is here. So, cheers, Dave. See you in a second. Right. Okay. So it is Friday, the 1st of August, 2025. So interesting bit things we've got to do today, and I think we will just wait for Dave to reappear. I thought he would be back by now. Oh, there he is.
Oh, I had to shut off a few things. I had fans going and coffee maker and all that. So
you don't hear the noise. Yeah. You don't hear the noise on this end.
No, but I had a fan right here and another fan in the other room, so it was irritating me. So I turned them off.
Well, irritating
you. It wasn't irritating me, but it was a background noise
that you didn't like.
Anyway, so here we are, August 1st.
Yeah.
Now, what's the holiday shaping up to? Is today itself the holiday, or is it Monday?
No, it's Monday is the holiday.
Monday, okay.
Civic holiday is on Monday. We found out about this. I was talking to this to one of our students at work. Actually, in Ontario, this day, Monday, is called Simcoe Day, after Lord Simcoe. Why wouldn't they just make it? It is his birthday. Why wouldn't they just make it, name it that day and call it that day? Famous Canadian.
Yeah, well, he was Lord Simcoe was born in the United States. He was a loyalist. He was like Benjamin Franklin's son. Like the country was divided. He came. He fought for the British. Won. The British lost. They sent the loyalists. Of course, the loyalists came to Upper Canada here. Lord Simcoe was our first governor. He was an abolitionist. He was dead against slavery. He tried to abolish slavery completely, but couldn't. He was very, very disappointed in that. But he managed to reduce slavery and set up part of what helped the British Empire leave slavery behind.
Yeah.
Emancipation Day is also August 1st. Emancipation Day is when the British discontinued slavery about 30 years before the U.S. did. And that was 1834, I believe. But part of the work prior to that was done by people like Simcoe. But if you start getting into that, then you get everybody through. Like if you name it Lord Simcoe Day, there'll be a 1,000 people saying that he wasn't a perfect person, and he could have done more to reduce slavery. He did dumb stuff with the natives, which I don't think he did, but they'll say something like that. There'll be 100 different things telling you.
Well, okay. Here's another one. Ironically, in a couple of other provinces, it's called Terry Fox Day.
That would be a good one too. Yeah, certainly.
And apparently, it celebrates. And hey, both Simcoe and Fox were born on the same day.
Ah, okay. All right. Well, there you have it. You have the two heroes. Really, you had two real heroes. You had two people that made a huge influence.
But of course, the other thing about Terry Fox is the Terry Fox Run is usually held the second Sunday in September.
Yeah, so we have the civic holiday.
It would be better to call it Simcoe than Fox because Terry Fox already has a day.
But this is a provincial. I don't think it's this is a provincial holiday. Basically, it is not a federal holiday.
It's a provincial holiday in 7 out of the 10 provinces.
Yeah, and I think that goes for Ontario as well. So Terry Fox came from Ontario. No, did he come from Ontario?
I don't know. I can't profess to know, to be quite honest.
I think he did, but let's put it this way: Terry Fox belongs to the whole country.
Yeah.
Right. And so does Lord Simcoe, basically. So
yeah.
But Lord Simcoe's focus really was in Upper Canada, so we can claim him here in Ontario, I would think.
Possibly, yeah.
But yeah, there, like we said yesterday, there's got to be dozens of notable people that this holiday could be named after.
Yeah, and it's interesting that one of the provinces that doesn't have the first Monday in August off is actually Quebec.
They don't have it?
No.
Well, yeah, you see, it's not a federal thing, and so yeah. I would just say that we could name the day better than just civic holiday, but
yeah, that's what we were talking about yesterday. Yeah. Okay, so one of the things we didn't get to yesterday is extremist influencers are weaponizing femininity.
Oh, okay. I only glanced at that article a few days ago. I read a little bit of it. Well, no, I actually read the whole article, but I haven't read it a second time.
They're using social media to attract more women to their ranks. And basically what they're doing is embedding hardline messages within benign narratives. Like they've got blogs that are about parenting, motherhood, that have also kind of alt-left or alt-right kind of messages within them.
This goes back a way, the article, doesn't it?
Yeah, but no, I think it was right. I found it 2 days ago.
Oh,
it's July 30th, yesterday date.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So women's workout routines that devolve into anti-government rhetoric. So there is here we have influencers, but they're finding other ways of influencing, not just in the media.
Yeah.
They're makeup tutorials with anti-feminist commentary, personal finance videos that blame immigrants for stealing jobs.
Yeah.
Where are these coming from, and who is doing it? Who is trying to influence women with these? Who is behind it? Who is trying to influence their political and social views? Who is the ones that are doing it?
Well, and actually what they're basically saying is it's a plot by extremist groups. And there's this is a report that was prepared by the Integrated Threat Assessment Center, and it was produced in 2023, but has been taken a while to get out because of the fact that it's a report that was called Weaponizing Femininity, Female Influence and the Use of Social Media to Promote Extremist Narratives. And it's August 23, but it was only recently released under the Access to Information Act.
Well, who's doing it? It says here, a body of open source research shows that women in extremist communities are taking on an active role by creating content specifically on image-based platforms with live streaming capabilities. These women foster a sense of community and create spaces that put their followers at ease, thereby normalizing the mainstream extremist rhetoric. In other words, what they've done, whoever they are, so they create maybe an exercise video for women, specifically designed for women, in this sort of benign thing. Well, here you are, an exercise video, but then during the video they introduce extremist narratives.
Yeah, we could do this better. We could be better at this if.
Yeah, so they use it. That's not an unusual tactic.
I think it's a tactic that's been employed. In fact, I wouldn't have been surprised. This is right out of the Goebbels playbook.
Meanwhile, it says here it does not name any influencers. It refers to alt-right extremist channels, anti-government rhetoric about COVID-19 lockdowns, and women-oriented blogs to promote white supremacy. But I think this is also happening on the far left. Somewhere in my readings, the same sort of influencing is happening on the far left. If you get if you go far enough left and you go far enough right, they meet each other. A gulag and a concentration camp are pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
and well, the other thing is that they're also saying that, for example, two women are. Well, there's actually a reason. Partially, in part, there's a reason for this, because they're saying women have long played prominent roles in violent factions, and their contributions are often downplayed, resulting in fewer charges, fewer sentences than their male counterparts, because they kind of bat their eyes at the judge, who then starts to think, hey, she's a poor woman and wouldn't do that sort of thing. But apparently only two women have ever been convicted of terrorism offences, and Maima Chowri, who joined ISIS and was captured in Syria, was sentenced to a symbolic 1 day in prison in Montreal recently.
Well, see, here you have they're trying to imply that the radicalized female just mentioned there was influenced. Well, yeah, they use standard sort of influencing techniques or to radicalize her. Obviously, it was whatever radicalized her was probably mostly female oriented.
Probably, yeah.
So you got all these people going off there and marrying ISIS fighters and terrorists, and so something worked. Something got a normal, everyday Muslim woman to radicalize. So that is a far that's an Islamic sort of violence. They're talking mostly here about white
but what they're also saying, what they're also saying is that when women, what they're basically saying in this regard was that when women are involved, the sentences, if there are ever sentences, tend to be much more reduced. So
most of the time, women to be involved. Most of the time, I think the judges feel that they have been overly influenced by the males in their sphere, that men have driven them into them themselves wouldn't have done it without the men being involved, which tells you that the courts think that women don't have their own mind, which is dumb.
Yeah, which is very dumb. Yeah.
I will remind, though, the one and only person that was shot, rioter at the January 6th riots in Washington, the only person that was shot dead by a defender was a woman. It was I don't know how many shots were actually fired by the police who are trying to fight back against the rioters on January 6th. Only one of the rioters got shot, and it was a woman.
Yeah,
and that's the only one that I don't think too many bullets were let off at all at that time. That may have been the only one. There was the group trying to crash through a door, and the person on the other side had a firearm and let go a shot, and it killed a woman. And it was aimed at the woman because I think she was in the lead there. She had become radicalized.
But obviously it was aimed at the person who was probably shouting the loudest on the other side of the door.
possibly, but I don't know. So that they'll tell you that there was a woman there,
Yeah.
uh,
Oh, I accept that. Yeah,
equally
yeah,
involved in everything. And it
yeah.
says, anyway, the work is called Weaponizing Femininity. Female influencers use social media to promote extremist narratives. The report dated August 2023, but was only recently released publicly under the Access of Information Act.
Yeah.
While the intelligence assessment is 2 years old, the phenomenon it identifies has continued and in some ways has worsened, says Evelyn Leidick, author of The Women of the Far Right, Social Media Influencers and Online Radicalization. Well, I appreciate that, but we saw what happened with the Antifa, what Antifa, so-called Antifa, did during the George Floyd riots. You could section that. You had the honest to God demonstrators, and then there was two other aspects of the whole demonstration. First, the demonstrators went through. Sometimes salted in them were the Antifa people that would then start smashing windows and stuff.
Yeah.
In the case of New York, where I heard an eyewitness account from a friend that said that the demonstration went through, and then behind them came a whole bunch of small bikes, motorbikes with the Antifa types that went in and smashed the hell out of windows and did all the damage.
Well, the demonstrations weren't the demonstrators were not responsible for that. It was those that followed the march.
Yeah, and you could see what happened, and then after that, the looters came in and took advantage.
Yeah,
of
the looters
that.
had nothing to do with it. They were just basically taking advantage of a situation that existed.
Yes. So we have a situation there where you had the demonstrators, then the Antifa, who were trying to take advantage of the demonstrations, and as I said, I heard an eyewitness account of somebody who lived in New York and was watched the demonstration go by. Then the Antifa types show up. They're the ones that had masks on and body armor of homemade body armor. Yeah. They're the ones that started doing the damage. This was not fully reported to us on the news because they were afraid of the consequences of that. Of reporting it, and it took individuals to go around, and New York was wasted by these people. That wasn't the demonstrators.
And interestingly enough, you were talking about demonstrations there, and I had this recollection. I went into a newsagent's or something in London one time. I wanted a can of Coke, and I went in there and they said, "You got no Coke in the fridge?" To the store owner. He said, "Yeah. I've had the best Saturday ever because we had a demonstration here earlier on, and all the demonstrators were popping in buying drinks."
Yeah. Well, my point was here that this particular article talks about
were making the mess. It was other people.
No, my point was here that the article was about right-wing extremism.
Yeah.
In this particular case with Antifa, what they did during the George Floyd riots is estimated they destroyed over $2 billion worth of property that they were left-wing. So the same sort of radicalization is happening on the left as well. When this is an article, and whoever was researching this was researching the right-wing influencers and did not touch upon the Antifa types. So the extreme radicalization is on the left as well as the right. But we tend to want to look at the right a lot, and I think that's a bad thing because the extremist is happening on both ends of the spectrum. And although Antifa and those sort of keep a low profile until you do have an advantage like riot. And remember too, the right-wing press in the United States were trying to explain the January 6th riots, attack on the Capitol building. They tried to initially say that it was Antifa that got into the crowd, and it was Antifa were the ones that did all the damage, and all the other people were just nice and just happened to be locked into that. So that was an extraordinary.
But that was actually never the truth, and that was, that was never recognized as the truth, was it?
No, but this is unfortunately, this is the way in which the press does it, particularly right-wing press of Fox. And this was a Fox spokesperson. Yeah. It was a woman. I don't know if it was Kellyanne or whatever. They're looking for excuses right away. Well, it must have been Antifa. And yet it was the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers who are hard right. And yet they tried to dump it on Antifa. I'm pretty sure if Antifa showed there, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys would have crushed them. So there was no Antifa presence at the Capitol building, but the press tried to make it look as if it must have been Antifa. It couldn't have been, good old red-blooded Americans.
Yeah. Okay.
So the radicalization happens on both ends of the spectrum, and I have a real problem with an article like this, part problem actually, because although the research was done on right-wing influencers, we have to assume that the same thing happens on the far right. But we seem to exclude we seem to exclude, or the press seems to like to exclude the hard left stuff. And that's a mistake, because if you go back to Germany or other countries prior to the Second World War, hard left and hard right influencers were the ones who were fighting over dominance. In Germany, and happened that the far right
in
won.
fact, there were battles on the streets at certain points in parts of Germany.
A lot of them.
Yeah. Between each of those groups, and that's how it played out there. We don't have soldiers, political soldiers here in the modern world, but it was a feature that existed in pre-Nazi Germany.
Yeah, and at any given time, the far left could have been the ones that took over. It turned out that the far right were the ones that got it. If you look at German politics at the time, there was far left extremists as well, tied to the Soviet Union.
Yeah,
we found this also in the Spanish Civil War. As a matter of fact, in the among the royalists who were fighting the fascists, there was fighting among them, extremist Stalinist and extremist Trotskyite divisions were fighting each other, while at the same time trying to fight Generalissimo Franco.
Yeah.
So we could see that happening in Spain, where you had the far right and the far left fighting one another. However, their ultimate goals were not to establish a democratic country in any way. Each one wanted to dominate completely. So this is very interesting. They use the benign makeup video or workout video or cooking video or video about mothers to introduce their poisonous messages. And I don't know, it's kind of creepy to me, because how effective are they?
Well, that's a very good question, because somewhere in here there are in excess of 6,000 They were talking because, again, this is talking about alt-right. It says in here there was in excess of 6,000 blogs out there, and they have somewhere in the region of 50,000 readers. Yeah, 6,000 Canadian alt-right platforms on the internet with some 50,000 readers.
I wonder how many alt-left ones are there.
Well, and of course they don't, and probably the same amount if you're going to be honest about it. And they're saying it's as likely women are just as present as men on the extremist social media platforms.
Yes, you can't. Usually, when you think of extremism, you usually tie it to men, but they're saying here that women can be just as effective as men in extremism.
Why not? Because women hold the same views. Women hold very similar views to men, and across all parts of the political spectrum.
Yeah, but you take a group like the Nazis, and there's hardly any women influencers there at all.
May not.
You take the extremism of the Soviet Union, and you can't find too many female influencers there.
But again, I would argue there were women in both of those scenarios that were in the background. There were actually women who worked for Stalin, and I don't know about women who worked for Hitler, but there were women who were. I was watching some documentaries about certainly the final days of the war. There were women out there who were basically pressurizing their men to be out and fighting.
So normally, though, when you look at extremism, say like Islamic extremism, you do find women getting involved, but it is almost completely a male-dominated extremist action. When you think of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, there don't seem to be too many women, at least out front.
Not out front.
What they're doing behind the scenes, how they are influencing their family members, is something that has to be looked at a little bit more. Where are the women in the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers or any of these other extremist organizations?
Yeah.
In Antifa, you might find more women influence because that's part of their whole thing. I think because Antifa is a little bit different and it comes out of a lot of it comes out of academia, you might find more female influences. But it's interesting to see how they get in there. But it works. Radicalization works, and that's a phenomenon we found with the Islamic terrorists and influencers. They find a way of making it work. Now, normally they're targeting men, but we saw that Muslim women from the West, including Canada, and some women who converted to Islam and then went to become wives and servants of ISIS.
Yeah.
And so what got into them?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so
very good question.
It worked. It worked it doesn't only just work on young men who have a pretty good life and then sacrifice themselves for a cause of a ruthless, violent cause. But then you have women sort of, you don't expect that. You think of young men being all full of testosterone and rage, but you don't really think of women being able to be influenced by that kind of rhetoric in the same way. But this kind of says that there are ways in which to do that.
Yeah. And hey, back in, anyway, we should move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could probably talk about this for quite some time. Anyway, Lincoln takes a leap to shrinking its governance. They're basically looking to move from 4 wards to 3, and shrink the size of the council at the next election from 9 members to 7.
Yeah, there's been a lot of pressure, particularly from the Ontario government, and I think it's probably justified that we are overgoverned. We have too many councillors. We have too many levels of government. We see here in Niagara Falls, we have 8 councillors. That's a reduction from 12 in earlier incarnations of.
Yeah, I think that basically, well, they're saying here Lincoln takes the first Niagara's first steps to shrink governance. I actually would say that, in fact, Niagara Falls took that, 30 years ago.
Yes, but it sacrificed our ward system. So can we? A lot of us are pushing for a ward system to be here in Niagara. Can we have a ward system with eight councillors?
Yeah, Niagara has grown. That's for sure. Yeah. Right. Whereas, basically, Lincoln had, arguably had too many people on it. But again, I also then do wonder how you can make a decision with 7 people. Sometimes. Well,
the mayor in Lincoln, the mayor is voted at large, but the councillors are ward members of the ward. So the mayor there still will be the decision maker if there's a tie. So there's no problem with them actually coming to a decision because they have an odd number.
Yeah, but you see, for example, it makes it very difficult to have committees.
Well, that's what it says in the article. It doesn't say it has difficulty in making committees. They already have them. The problem is, how do they distribute the councillors through those committees? That gives more work for each one of the councillors if they have that many committees. Well, the answer maybe is to reduce the number of committees that they have. Committees?
But again, you can't have a committee of 2 people.
Well, the problem is the committees are not made up of the councillors. They're made up of other people, and the councillors sit on those committees.
Yeah, well, I'm not talking about but you see, I'm talking about subparts of the council, subdivided, anyway, I think it makes awkward. For example, when we had that question about selecting the new CAO in Niagara Falls, and Laurie wanted to be on the platform. Well, there was, I think they couldn't have a committee of 4. They could only have a committee of 3.
Well, yeah, they have an odd number, but yeah, that was a different thing, and how committees work that way. She was excluded from that, and there was some controversy around it.
Yeah.
But as far as linking goes, the arguments against shrinking. One of the arguments against shrinking the number of councillors is that the committees would not be. Councillors would have to do a whole lot more, take on more committee work.
Yeah.
With less councillors, but the overall situation is we are overgoverned. That has been the complaint of just about everybody, that there is too much governance. And if we take a look at a place like the Niagara region, which Lincoln is a part of, if you take a look at that, every municipality has its governance, and then there is the region over top of that. So we have possibly
which
unnecessary levels of governance.
Yeah, Lincoln only gets 1 representative on the regional council.
Yeah, but they're part of it. So where do you cut the line? Like Niagara Falls with 8 councillors seems to be all right, but when they had 12, that made that was too large for our city. So where do you cut the line? How many councillors do you need, and so on and so forth? So they've reduced the size of government which you normally want. But will government then be effective?
Yeah.
They're reducing them now. Well, they have to increase them as the population grows later on. So that's
that's one of the things I would argue. I would argue that because of increased population size, the Niagara Falls Council number of councillors in Niagara Falls should now be 10.
Possibly. It works pretty good with 8 right now, and we seem to have fairly good representation, at least on paper. Whether we get good representation, that's always an argument, and always will be.
Yeah, that's another question entirely.
Yeah.
So
anyway,
let's leave that out of this discussion.
Yeah. So we see the call, particularly from the Ontario government, and it's not a new one that they brought up, but they brought it up more strongly, that we're over-governed.
Yeah.
And that so amalgamations and things like that were talked about early on in the Ford administration, it's kind of put on the back burner now, is to improve representation with less governance. That generally is overall the opinion of most people, because it will reduce the cost of government too, and the fact that do we need that much government? So anyway, so the Lincoln's the first one to say, okay, yeah, it's better off for us to reduce the size of government.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, actually, what it ends up, I think what the net ends up being is you've got Ward 1 is the town centre, Ward 2 is the south end of Beamsville, and then Ward 3 is everything to the east, which is Victoria Avenue, etc. Vineland.
Yeah, you have to have. They seem to be happy with the representation so far. There was dissenting voices. It was a 6-3 vote, but you can imagine the ones that are voting against it are the councillors that are going to get eliminated.
Yeah, exactly. And well, I don't know how, it'll probably be the ones with the lowest votes going in.
Possibly,
voting against. Yeah. Certainly, if we were voting to go, let's say from 8 to 5, which I wouldn't recommend, it would be the 3 with the lowest votes that would be going, I'm against this.
Yeah.
So anyway,
we have it. So what else do we have?
Yeah,
I think the big issue was yesterday was Trump saying that he's going to dump a 35% tariff on Canada.
Well, we're going to get to that one, but I think the other one, the next one that I was going to do next was actually the question about the Toronto tenants who won their AGI case.
Yeah, this is something maybe you can speak to, being it's your trade. In this particular case, it's a rare victory for tenants. It seems they went to court when their building was being renovated, and they were asked to pay much more in rent. And go ahead, talk about it. And
basically they were asked an above guideline increase is basically when the building owner, there's 2 ways that you can do an above guideline increase. One, because there's a massive increase in taxation by the property on the property taxes, and 2, which is when you've got when you've got what are called capital expenditures. And this was about capital expenditures, and the Clearview Heights holding company that is the landlord, basically updated the building, redeveloped the site, and then they were basically charging for parts of the place that the tenants were saying that wasn't capital expenditure, that was something. Site remediation is never made sense to the tenants, and that was about half the cost of the proposed AGI. Because site remediation is, if you think about it, it's pure maintenance. I've done a couple of these AGIs, and the tenants I've represented have mediated their situation. Clearly, this particular one, they decided to go to a hearing because there's actually what's called an adjudicative case conference, and the ACC is there to actually try to get to a mediated settlement.
Yes, so it wasn't, and also they introduced things that did not pertain. They said that there was environmental assessments and things like that, which did not factor in. They weren't obliged to do those things, and yet they added them as.
And then they charged the tenants for them.
Yeah. So.
And essentially nothing wrong with doing an environmental study, but you don't charge the tenants for an environmental study.
Now the tenants did get had to pay more, but not nearly as much as was anticipated, because apparently whoever judged the case said this counts and this doesn't.
Yeah.
And that remediation part, which was more than half of the expenses that were presented, were rejected. They did improve the boiler system and other things like that, rebuilt those, so those were included, but the remediation thing was cut out.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the things that I did one of these, and I was a tenant representative on one of these, and my submission to the board was more than 350 pages. Right, so it's real serious stuff, and it's all about whether it's a capital expenditure versus whether it's maintenance or a remediation. And the question is, it all comes down to case law.
Yeah, explain case law.
Well, case law basically is the decision by judges, and in terms of the landlord and tenant board, other typically judges, because the decision will have been made in the divisional court or above, and what has to happen is somebody has made a reasoned argument about what applies to these rules and what does not apply to the rules.
Yes, well, in this particular case, they wanted a 3 that the guidelines for increases is 2.5%.
And they wanted
the guidelines are normally. Now this QMW, which is the company, argued for rent increase of 3.8%, claiming around $647,000 in total expenditures, of which site remediation accounted for $295,000, most of which went to an environmental investigation and assessment. The assessment is needed to obtain a record of site condition, which is filed. However, the whoever judged this rejected that, saying that was not necessary.
And the thing is, exactly. So the adjudicator who listened to the case quite clearly said it wasn't necessary. Fine if you're going to get it, but that's upon the landlord to do, it's not an expense that can be passed down to tenants.
Yes. Anyway, so we have a victory for the tenants.
Yeah.
And so the system works, it seems, sometimes, and the tenants are much relieved. Some of them being there, according to this, says 20, 30, and 40 years tenants. So they can be on the hook for the major things like the boiler refab and all that. But the so-called remediations could not be included in this. Yeah. So anyway, it looks as if they won, but they are still very tense because they feel that the area could be redeveloped and they still are at risk of losing their homes.
That's another matter entirely, and that's that's a different matter entirely, and that's something that they'll face in the future.
Yes. So, okay. Well,
Right.
It seems that there has been a modest victory there, but the fact that they did win actually makes the papers. You know, they bucked the trend where landlords are trying to find excuses to raise rent and eject their tenants.
Yeah. All right. Moving on, with the one you were talking about, Trump's putting 35% tariffs on Canada.
Yeah, we're in a very tough position here. Trump has reiterated the fact that Canada has not done anything or not enough to stem fentanyl flow from Canada in the United States. That's an unrealistic accusation.
Yeah.
This is just an excuse to put pressure on Canada, just as the excuse of Canada intending to acknowledge Palestinian state is a thorn in his side. Although, you can never figure out what Trump's trying to do. It's all lots and lots of bombast. But he said, okay, well, that's going to be an issue with me. But how come it wasn't an issue with the EU, with France? How come it wasn't an issue with the UK?
Yeah.
They got their trade deals. France is the first G7 country to recognize Palestine as a state, and yet somehow it's now all of a sudden it's an issue, a trade issue with Trump.
Yeah.
So basically, what he's done is he's given Mexico 90 more days to come up with a deal. He is really trying to push the Mexican tariffs farther away because he knows once the tariffs come, the foodstuffs and other things that come from Mexico in the United States will have to rise in prices. He doesn't want that to happen too close to the midterms. And he knows tariffs take a long time to sort of filter through the system and actually then affect the consumers. And he's also divide and conquer. So you have two major trade, his two major trade trade partners. You don't want them to anyway get together. So what you do is you give one a stay of execution and they give them hope, but the other one you go after, so they can't get together and coordinate their plans.
And the other thing, of course, is that probably the trade with Canada is more high tech than it is with Mexico, and the foodstuffs is probably what's balancing the Mexico. Now, all three
automakers, they make a lot of cars there. There's a lot of industrial components coming more and more from Mexico. We saw that John Deere moved a big plant there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, I don't know. But you see, Detroit 3 automakers a report that tariff blows, tariffs giving them a hard time. But experts are saying that a trade deal is the only solution, really.
Well, yeah. So we find another article in there where the big three automakers are taking a big hit.
Yeah,
they're not losing market share and they're still selling their vehicles, but they're the ones that are absorbing the costs so far, and but those costs will eventually be put upon the consumer because they can't otherwise avoid it for too long. They have responsibilities to their stockholders. Now, what Ludnick has said is that, and Bessett has said, well, the exporter will absorb the tariff. In other words, in order to keep their products competitive in the United States, they will sell them for a reduced price, and what is left of that will be absorbed by the seller, basically. So GM will absorb some of the cost of tariffs for parts that are coming from Mexico and Canada,
yeah, but Ford has
and
been saying,
that Canada and Mexico will sell them for less, so there shouldn't be any real effect. Well, that only lasts for so long because GM has responsibilities for its stockholders. It can't reduce the value of its stock for very long and withhold dividends for very long because it has stockholder responsibility. If I invested in GM and I get a dividend and that dividend is not going up or is being reduced, that would be from tariffs. So I would say to GM, look, increase the price of your car so I can get my dividend.
Yeah, it's not, it becomes a very awkward argument because now you're saying, hey, Mr. Shareholder, hey, Dave, I'm sorry, you're not going to get $1 million on your dividends this year, where we can only afford 800,000 because of the tariff situation. Sorry about that.
Yes, because we have to absorb the cost of the tariffs. So this will happen for a short period of time. We find lots and lots of people front loading, and that's still happening. Prior to
you can front load if the tariff is 10%. You can't front load 35%.
No, I'm talking about front loading. So right now, this is a situation in the United States. People in anticipation of the tariff have built up a lot of inventory. For instance,
okay.
For instance, when the copper tariff was proposed, 50%, the U.S. manufacturers ordered an incredible amount of copper from Chile. Yeah. Chile provides 11% of the copper going into the United States. It is and Chile is the number one provider of copper to the United States. So what a spokesman for the Chile copper industry is said that already that the United States has already bought all its copper needs and will not buy any more this year because it's bought a huge amount, way more than normal, to try to avoid any kind of tariffs. Yeah, you need not have worried in this particular case because the Trump administration is defining the refinement level of copper, so it wouldn't affect Chile anymore and probably not affect Canada the way because they send billets of copper and so on like that. So it's the final production of copper that they're going to tariff, and that mostly comes from China.
Yeah. Okay, and the other part of this is, of course, Ford said Wednesday that it took $800 million hit for the second quarter. That's 800 million US, 1.1 billion Canadian for the second quarter because of tariffs.
Well, they're saying that the only thing that will fix all this is some kind of certainty and a fixed trade deal. Then they'll know how much they can charge the consumer. Obviously, when a part's coming from Canada and there's a 25% tariff on it, and they put that in the car, that portion of the car goes up 25%. So they're saying they're holding back the price increases on cars or anything else in the meantime. What happens with tariffs, as I described before, let's say Europe is sending something to the United States, say wine, and it goes to the United States, and it has a 15% tariff. What the vintners will normally do is eat some of that cost, and those selling that product will eat some of the cost for the short term. Yeah, and then gradually the tariff will kick in because you cannot avoid charging for it if you want the same profit margins.
No, exactly, and exactly that. It's like if there's a 25% tariff, your $10 bottle of wine goes up to $12.50, but instead of putting it up to $12.50 all at once, you make it $10.50, and then 11, then $11.50, then 12, then $12.50. So you eventually get there, but you do it through a number of steps.
Yeah, the gradual introduction, and so the vintner who makes the wine will take reduced profit or even take a hit in order to maintain their market in the United States, and then gradually introduce the cost increases to make up, because they don't want to abruptly charge the tariff and shock their customers away from it. But if they do it gradually, in a combination of those who sell it take a hit and those who produce it take a hit, but the fact remains that it is going to go up. And tariffs take a while to percolate down through the system. So what Trump is counting on is, by delaying tariffs and giving Mexico a 90-day break and so on, that he can delay this percolation of tariff hit, so that it doesn't seem so bad when it comes time for the midterms. So he's clever in that respect. Yeah. Also, because Trump has given this huge tax break, presumably mostly to the rich or wealthier Americans, he has to make that up, because the cost of government did not go down. So the tax revenue that he needs, so what he'll do is he'll put the tariff on, which is a tax.
Yeah.
And they hope to get $300 billion or something every year from that. But that is American money from the American consumer.
Yeah. All right. We'll be talking more about tariffs anyway. Can we talk about these indigenous gifts to Doug Ford and the other provincial leaders when they were recently that recent event when they had indigenous people handing out medallions?
Yeah, it seems to be like, I can understand these are lengthy, they're labor intensive. The medallions, the indigenous medallions are made of beads, and they are intense. They're hard to make. Basically, they take a long time. There's labor intensive. Yeah. So when an indigenous group or someone in the indigenous community makes these and then presents it to someone, it has a lot of meaning for the indigenous people. So a guy like Doug Ford was presented with one, and of course he wore it during that time. Mark Carney was presented with one. It's highly symbolic. It means a certain amount of things to the indigenous people. But when indigenous people tried to give a rapper a medallion, he refused it outright. But a different rapper would take it and put it on. I don't know. So who gives it and why is a little bit of a mystery to me. Well, normally you would think something like this would be a sort of gift of prestige for a distinguished person. But do you call a rap artist a distinguished person?
I don't know. It depends. You and I may not have heard of them, but they may be all the rage in the 25 to 35-year-olds.
Yeah, I looked at it and I thought, well, I want one. They look pretty cool.
The medallion. Yeah, I couldn't wear. I would have trouble wearing it the same way as Doug Ford was wearing it over and above his suit. But that's because I don't like wearing things. I don't like things hanging on my chest, on kind of this area here where there's a name for it. I can't remember what the name is.
Maybe they can glue it to your forehead.
Well, I find it itches. I tend to put it in my suit pocket, things like that, on my suit pocket.
Well, that's what I mean. Glue it to your forehead, no problem.
and you see, for example, I don't wear those passes. Can't do it.
Well, anyway, so Doug Ford is wearing one, but still. It is a tradition among indigenous people, and they give them out for anyone that they feel, for instance, that they want to honor or gift or it for some whatever reason. So there is no rhyme, no reason why they give it. They give it as a matter of feeling, but they do understand that the rest of us don't understand why they do it, the cultural significance for the indigenous people, that we don't fully understand why they do it. And after reading this, I still don't understand, because if you're giving it to somebody like Doug Ford, who is a premier, or Mark Carney, who is the prime minister, you can understand that. You could understand the ceremony and the respect and the sort of connection they're trying to establish of mutual respect. But if they give it to a rapper, I don't understand that. And in this article, there was an indigenous kid wanted his mother to make make one for a rapper, a performer, and he threw it on stage. And a little later on, he was delighted that backstage there was pictures of the performer wearing it. Now, that kid asked his mom to make it, but I'm not fully understanding why that medallion was in. Is it just because he likes the rapper?
Yeah,
is the rapper or the?
I was going to say that
significant.
But Dave, you'd probably kind of be applauding it if the medal was given to Ozzy Osbourne, for example.
I still wouldn't really get it. Like if Ozzy Osbourne had done stuff for indigenous people or spoke upon their issues, that kind of thing. But if I was just someone of music that they liked and they wanted to credit that person, I'm not. I don't see how I. So yeah, I am in mystery of why indigenous people think a medallion for a rap singer and a medallion for a premier is similar. And so it says here, the incident ignited discussion online about cultural significance of medallions and whether the value is appreciated or understood by non-indigenous celebrities and politicians. I'll say that too. I would like to know the significance of it. So Carrie Benjo, editor-in-chief of the media, anyway, it's First Nations media in Saskatchewan, worries medallions aren't respected the way they should be by recipients. Yeah. For instance, within the Indigenous community, one giving another person a medallion would be understood much more different than if someone from Indigenous. So it's a cultural thing. So within that culture, they understand it perfectly well. But but I'm not so sure that we do. They don't understand the historical significance of a lot of this artwork. A lot of skill goes into it, and a lot of thought.
Well, I look at it. I look at the one that Doug Ford is wearing here, and I can't see the detail, but boy, it looks interesting.
Well, the one given to the rock artist that did wear it backstage was kind of like the face of that star.
Yeah,
beat it in. So it took a lot of skill to put it in there.
Yeah.
So obviously the person who threw it up on stage wanted to acknowledge his appreciation for the musician.
Yeah.
However, the musician, not coming from that same culture, would not fully appreciate the significance of that.
Sure.
And I believe that's the truth. Although they were honored by it and wore it.
And you basically, I think, from the both of us here, we're looking at this and we're looking at the beauty of them. But we both said we don't really fully understand the reasoning behind it.
beating to gift is part of her cultural identity, she said, rooted in the teachings of reciprocity and sacrifice. So, yes, it's highly significant within that culture. But I think we need a little bit of education on this. If someone were to give me a medallion for my first rate bingo calling, I would accept it, but not fully be aware of the cultural significance.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
that's probably the same for Doug Ford.
Yes. You do know. So here's the pictures of the beaded medallion for her son gift to Ice Cube. Was kind of like a beaded picture of Ice Cube. I don't know if you can see that there. See that?
Yeah, I don't think you can. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you can. Yeah.
So that would have taken a lot of work to do for sure. And it was sort of an homage to Ice Cube.
Well, I guess
it's just a gesture of appreciation, love. It could be a number of different things, but I think it's a very good tradition. I think we should learn a little bit more about the significance of it, because maybe we could learn something from that.
Yeah, I put the link into the article down in the comments. So if anybody wants to take it, they can do so. All right.
Yeah.
So, take a look at the link and go from there.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we can kind of call it a day at that point.
Yes. And without further ado, I bid you adieu. Do not forget Gaza. Something's happening there. I mean, seriously, we're not going to get a trade deal because we are all now suddenly anti-Semitic, according to Donald Trump. It's a shame that he would use something like that as an excuse against us. Particularly when he didn't do much against France and the UK.
Yeah, and didn't we say this was going to happen yesterday?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
he's exactly. So we're in a tough spot. We don't have a whole lot of leverage against the United States, but this is not like the digital services tax that Carney dropped. He could do that, but this is the conscience of the nation, so he can't push us into not going ahead and recognizing Palestinian, provided the conditions are met that Carney's laid out.
Yeah. Somehow I doubt the conditions will be met.
Yeah. So in any case, well, the conditions could very well be met. And I think there's a strong possibility, but the message is very clear. This is not going to happen. The two-state solution is being killed daily by settlers stealing more and more property from the Palestinians on the West Bank. As John Mersheimer pointed out, that from the very beginning, the Zionists had an idea of a much larger Israel, a greater Israel, which included parts of Jordan, the Sinai Peninsula, southern Syria, and southern Lebanon. And that cannot include any more than 20% Arabs, basically, or Palestinians, as we like to call them. So the whole idea is that if you cannot, you want the bigger land, but you can't, and it has to be ethno-Jewish or ethno-religious a country. That means you have to expel a large amount of people, and that's worked for them. Because Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt all have huge populations of refugees. Gaza is particularly made up of refugees from Israel, 70%. There are more Palestinians in Jordan than regular Jordanese. That's how many Palestinians got forced out of their land into there. So anyway, let's hope that things develop. But the first things first, let's start feeding those people.
Yeah.